Okay, welcome everyone to the November BAC meeting. It's November 3rd, 2025. With that, my name is Owen Gonzalez. I'm the Transportation Plan / Liaison with the BAC. And with that, I'll hand it off to Cynthia Palmer, who's the chair of the committee.
Thank you so much, Ellen. My name is Cynthia Palmer, and before we get started, I just wanted to mention we had been planning or hoping that the Arlington County Police Department would accept our invitation to come to speak tonight. We had invited them some weeks ago. Unfortunately, they let us know last week that they are not available tonight. So therefore, our agenda is a little bit more slim than we had hoped, so we may finish early. In the alternative, if we have some extra minutes, we might come up with a list of questions that we could send to the ACPD, and we are still hoping to see them soon, not on the roads, but hopefully at our December meeting. Well, yes, on the roads, but not in a real intimate way. All right. I'm Cynthia Palmer, and the introductory question is, how did you end up here at this meeting? And in particular, we are curious what brought you to your very first BAC or PAC meeting. And so I will start. As some of you know, my first meeting of the BAC was in early 2012. I had a new job that forced me to go through the Lynn-Lee intersection, the so-called intersection of death, every day. I had some close calls, and as a single mom, I was terrified that I might not make it home to my kids. I felt I needed to tell someone about this really dangerous intersection, and I found the BAC and I went to my first meeting. I was very nervous and shaken. I raised my hand and I was like, I gotta tell you about this really, really scary intersection. And then I learned that BAC had been fighting for decades, I think, to on this very intersection of Lynn or Langston Lee. Langston Lee. Yeah. So anyways, that I thank that intersection for bringing me to BAC. Unfortunately, I still find it rather uncomfortable to go through it. All right, let's go through the list and see who else is here. We have Andrew Martin at the top of my list.
Hey, yep, Andrew Martin, Arlington Heights. Found the BAC when just kind of going down the list of the various Arlington committees when looking to get more civically engaged, and this seemed to be the one that was maybe most relevant, and maybe as an avid cyclist, both for kind of recreation and just getting around town, very relevant, and wanted a place to contribute. So here I am.
Thank you. Well, I'm so glad you found us on the list. We're lucky to have you. And next, Dana Bress.
Yeah, I got involved around 2010 when I started bicycling in this era, and I have no idea exactly what caused me to show up at the first meeting, but I was made to feel welcome on day one, so hell, I stayed.
Excellent. Ellen.
Hey guys, this is Ellen. Yeah, I joined the BAC because I was assigned to serve as the staff liaison. But I'll just go ahead and say that I'll switch this question for myself. I joined this profession because I really cared about biking and walking. I grew up on army bases around the country and the suburbia around the U.S., and I was always envious of my family and friends that lived in cities and walkable neighborhoods. So that's what kind of brought me back to this journey, and I'm happy to be here with you guys.
Wonderful. We're happy to have you. And Eric Goodman.
Hi, I'm Eric Goodman, and gosh, I have been on this committee for such a long time, decades, and really several decades. And it was also the intersection at Roslyn Circle as well. I guess it's North Lynn Street and it was Lee Highway. Now I guess it's Langston. But that actually was I was commuting and that there was a very close call for me crossing there, and I agree that things got a little better before. That seems like the timing on the crossing time has decreased from what it was at one time. They actually gave us more time to cross and hold back the right turning cars that come. Actually, there's two lanes, two parallel lanes. So one lane actually cuts off the other's view and makes it really scary when you're crossing there. So that was kind of what started, and eventually I became the chair of the BAC and also the chair of the PAC. So I've been here quite a while, just a survivor in some ways. So thanks.
Thank you, Eric. Mike is next.
Hey, yeah, Mike Hanna, Arlington Heights as well. Yeah, I actually started at the BAC as the rep for the E2C2, which was E2C2 at the time, and they needed a rep for the bike committee. And so I was the official tree hugger on the bike committee for 2 or 3 years before they finally kicked me off of E2C2, and I decided to stay on bike committee. So I've always been a big biker just to get around town, and that's even increased more. So we've got a lot of work to do.
We got the lucky part of that deal. And Lauren.
Hi, Lauren Hassel. I work with Bike Arlington and Walk Arlington, but my background's kind of in outreach and communications, and I got into this area by attending a charrette back when I moved here from Chicago in the early 90s, before any of the planning kind of became realized. So I came in and found a lot of active people, and a lot of inspired planning was going on, and now a lot's been realized. So I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. And Pam is next. Pam Van Hine.
My mic was off. Can you hear me now? I don't have my headset on. It's Lauren Hassel's fault. I'm Pam Van Hine, and many years ago, around 2011 or so, there was a flyer in our local library about proposing walkabouts. And I thought, oh, we should do one in our neighborhood. We don't have one. And there were 4 of us in our area who separately and without knowing each other proposed ones in 2 neighborhoods, Aurora Highlands and Arlington Ridge. And at the time, Lauren Hassel was Walk Arlington, and she was responsible for the project. So I got to know her. And then I was very upset about what was going on at Eads at the time. And because there was no pedestrian improvements. And she said, well, join the Pedestrian Advisory Committee. So eventually I went there in 2014, and I've been on it ever since. I love it. And I started going to many of the BAC meetings because there's so much overlap, and I was working closely at the time with Jillian on a bunch of projects, including Vision Zero. That's it.
Thank you. I so appreciate working with the PAC. Next we have Randy.
Hi, I'm Randy Swart. Back in the late 70s, early 1980s, a bunch of us had begun had formed sort of a loose Arlington group. We were almost all WABA members. We were like Cynthia. We were commuters who rode the same routes every day and realized that unless we got the county to do something about them, we were going to be riding over those same problems every day. So long about the early 80s, a guy named Hank Hume, who was the director of public works, as they called it in those days, called us all together and said, hey, let's have a bicycle advisory committee to advise me on what to do. And we were enthusiastic about it because Hume was a transportation cycle, what would you say? He didn't actually ride himself, but he understood that cycling was a lot of times for transportation and that we weren't just riding toys. So that's how I got started.
I like how you put that. Next, we have Richard.
Hello there. My name is Richard Bailey. First time tuning into one of these. Just kind of an observer, I guess, and commuter biker.
Wonderful. Welcome. And how did you find out about the BAC?
I believe through the Arlington County or maybe the Arlington DES Twitter, basic social media.
Good. All right. Well, great to have you. And now, Aaron.
Hey guys, Aaron Schutz. Started biking to work about a dozen years ago, and Elizabeth Denton from was it Arlington Transportation Partners, I think, was working with Yorktown High School where I work, trying to increase biking stuff there. And she, at some point, this is when I guess there was a bit of flux in the BAC or a purge or something, 7, 8 years ago, and said, "Hey, they need some people. Would you be interested?" And I said, "I don't know." So here I am.
All right. Fantastic. Steve.
My name's Steve Offit. I live near Courthouse, and as we were talking, I couldn't really remember exactly, like, my first meetings, but I'm pretty certain what happened is I actually got a consulting gig helping the county with climate back in the mid O's. And I'm pretty certain that probably what happened is I bumped into, people who were working in the county, and it got me enthused. I'd been a bike commuter for, 10 years by then, and been a cyclist for much longer. And I think that I must have just said, oh, well, I should be going to those meetings. I'll start going. But I can't remember my very first meeting. I do remember always feeling comfortable in those meetings way back, being welcomed by all of you, who some of you were around before then too, and are still here. So thanks.
Steve, I believe you addressed our committee in your position when you were consulting for the county. I think that was the first time we saw you at one of our meetings.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you have a better memory than I do. I don't specifically recall that, but I'm sure that coming to the meeting made me feel like, well, I should just come to all these meetings, as a citizen, or whatever. But yeah, thanks for helping me out.
Who have I missed? I think Elliot.
Hey, yeah, sorry, I joined a little late. I think I don't remember how I actually found out about this, but I had just been biking and got hit by a car. I was like, this is ridiculous. We need more bike lanes. So decided to get a little bit more involved, and now here I am.
Well, I'm glad that something good came out of getting hit by a car. Where did that happen? And were you okay?
I was okay. I dislocated my shoulder, which really hurt, but it was on, I forget if it's Wilson or Clarendon. It's like on one of the downhill. It's actually right where they are doing one of the pilots in Vision Zero for like stopping cars from turning right without looking. It was one of those like right hook incidents.
Well, I'm glad that you got through that okay with a painful shoulder, but not anything more than that.
More or less good as new these days.
All right, good, good. Who else? Did I miss anybody else? I think that's it. So, welcome everyone, and with our truncated agenda, we're going to start out with a debriefing or a post-mortem to talk about our meeting last month with Wei Wang. She is the head of transportation and the head of more than transportation for Arlington County. And I think most of us were there in that conversation. Wei is someone whom I respect tremendously. I think she's really kind and really smart, and her heart is where ours are. I mean, she does, she wants the roads to be safe. So I'm just like that's that's where I'm starting from. And and the reason that we were talking with her was that DES no longer wants to interact with the Bicycle Advisory Committee or the Pedestrian Advisory Committee on road safety issues, on intersections, on specific projects. We used to have a very tight relationship with the Department of Environmental Services, and lately that's been cut off. They don't have time to interact with the road safety committees of the county. So that brings us to raises a lot of questions, because as we described in our introduction, many of us are here because either we've been hit or we've had close calls, or we're just really concerned. We read crash reports and um, they're just like a gut punch. I mean, it's so upsetting to hear about children or adults who get hit, often or usually needlessly hit by vehicles and drivers. So anyways, we have been wondering for quite some time now, what is our role as a committee? We wrote a lengthy letter a year ago to County Manager Mark Schwartz. Last November, we followed it up with a letter to Mr. Schwartz in March. We met with him in March. He advised that instead of focusing on specific intersections and problems with lanes and lighting and things like that, that we instead focus on setting standards and policies for the county. And so we were curious what to make of Mr. Schwartz's suggestions. We felt like we might be stepping on toes. I mean, it's kind of not, I mean, it feels a little presumptuous for BAC to be setting standards for the county, but we are certainly willing. So anyways, right after that meeting with Mark Schwartz, we started working toward trying to bring in Wei Wang, who leads transportation, to get her perspective. Where do we go from here? What do we do as a committee? So we met with her on October 8th together with the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and she had 3 recommendations. One, we should continue to help at the project level by using the Report a Problem app by tracking the notices on Arlington's websites, and anywhere else that we could find to weigh in, as I guess as individuals mostly. Second, BAC and PAC could continue to help at the planning level through participation in open houses and on committees like Arlington's Transportation's Future. And third, she said the BAC and the PAC should expand our horizons and start advocating for expansion of state laws and local authority, which was a little bit curious to some of us. So that was on October 8th. On October 16th, there was an Arlington Now story, which I believe I circulated, but I can resend it to anyone or you can look it up. And that pretty well summarized what happened at that meeting. If you read the comment section, I suggest bracing yourself first because there's a certain degree of animosity toward particularly the bicycling community, as we so often see. So anyways, now we have to figure out how to move forward. My own reactions after these various meetings, one that the county has essentially written off its road safety committees to some extent, that they are missing an opportunity, a resource that is theirs free of charge, that BAC and PAC have a tremendous amount of expertise. I mean, this group, I have never failed to be impressed with, I mean, how you all know every intersection, the timing of every road signal, every pothole, like unbelievable, the wealth of experience, the engineering know-how, and design. You all know the laws, the county laws, the state laws. It is just such an impressive group, and I feel like often a 5-minute conversation with the BAC or the PAC can mean mistakes averted and money saved for the county. So, so it's really unclear to me what Arlington County wants from the BAC and the PAC. They kind of need to have these committees in order to get their gold standard walkable, bikeable county recognition. That's something they check off the list, and it's kind of important for that purpose. But how exactly they'd like us to advise is unclear. And as we all mentioned during the meeting, I mean, not all of us, but several of us spoke up that we cannot be advocates. That is not our job, and that's actually contrary to, our charter. We can be advocates in our own time, but the committee, our role is to advise the county manager. So, anyways, it felt like there's a disconnect between the road safety committees and sort of where the county is at. I'm talking way too long. I'd love to hear what others think. Um, um, Correct me if I'm wrong. Share what reactions you had and where do we go from here? So, yeah. Who wants to jump in?
Well, hell, I'll
Dana.
go. Yeah,
Yes, please.
I think that the issue is that the county has for so long just kind of assumed everything was going to be fine. We see that with any of a number of issues. There was an Arlington Now article this morning about the fact that we're up to 42% of the people are paying to use the parking spaces that the county provides. And the comments there were just as scathing about the county. The fact that there's an inability to, there's no interest in actually managing the process. And I think that like I said in the meeting with Wei, the engagement is largely performative. And if that's the way they want it, then maybe the answer is we take our comments and observations, which are generally pretty salient, pretty pithy, and take them to Arlington Now. Take them into the directly into the public as opposed to trying to fix this within in-house. The fact that that the police and don't seem interested in participating. And the county manager doesn't seem interested in making the police be interested in participating. Elwin commented, he came into the BAC because he was assigned the responsibility, as opposed to somebody from DES staff saying this is a great opportunity to get input from people that really know. He got voluntold to and the county has just seems to not have any mechanism to fix things. You read the code, and the county code is just full of holes that just allow people who don't want to do it right to not do it right. And because we're running accounting on a budget, we don't have the we don't allocate the staff to make the people who aren't doing it right do it. Okay, rant over.
Thank you for reading the county code. That I'm always impressed when you when you dig up things that I never read before. All right, Andrew.
Yeah, so I guess so we're a creature of the county manager, but so kind of he I guess he manages things. So ultimately he is kind of in charge of directing our mission or what staff does in their interactions with us. Is there any room for the county board in that relationship? Because ultimately they are the ones who direct the manager. And I guess, yeah, since I'm not quite the legal expert in the room, but just kind of mapping the chain of responsibility, like who
I,
has the ultimate say of where we belong.
I can say that we really are we've sort of had our hands slapped talking to the county board. Essentially, we report to the manager. The manager doesn't want us to talk to the board. The Transportation Commission actually works, or their mission is for the board. And I don't know, Cynthia, do we have a Transportation Commission person on our group now? It used to be Chris and then he is now off of that. Do we have anybody who is with the Transportation Commission?
That's a really good question.
because we could go through a representative of the Transportation Commission to bring things to the board in through that process. But otherwise, we're not supposed to kind of go directly to board members.
Is there any hope that, I know the RLNL reporter Scott McCaffrey seems to be the one who listens to these meetings after the fact.
I think
he
he just reports them.
yeah, but any
and says what he
if a
wants
board
to.
member happens to read those articles.
So, I mean, I remember in the past, county board members have been guests at our meetings. I remember Chris Zimmerman coming. I remember Jay Fasek coming. I remember.
It used to be that way, I think, under County Manager Donnellan. She kind of set that separation at that point. But yeah, we used to have a ride, and well, we used to have a ride every year with 2 county board members. And we definitely had more opportunity through that. I mean, we as well can go to county board meetings if we wish to, and bring these up during you know, sort of the open opportunity.
I mean, Elwin, have you been told exactly what it is the county manager wants to get from us? And I mean, you are our liaison.
Haven't spoken to him since the meeting that he came back in March, I believe. So I guess what he said during the call was he wanted y'all to think more big picture policy-wise, from what I understand.
Well, along those lines, Elwin, how frequently do you speak with him about BAC?
Very rarely.
Okay, so he has no liaison then.
Yeah, I mean, if our job is to advise the county manager, you know, either he or, you know, obviously the decision-making staff would be the ones who would get our ongoing advice and counsel, but I don't feel like that's happening ever, right?
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean,
we
it's my
advise.
opinion, if he doesn't want our advice, I mean, it's true, you know, what's been said is we are the advisory council. If the county manager doesn't want a bicycle advisory committee, he doesn't have to have one, right? He could just say, go, I don't want one anymore, just disband, right? There's nothing that that keeps us in existence, I guess, except for the, you know, county manager saying that he wants one, and it's not clear that he does. So,
Well, and he needs one for the ratings. Well, he doesn't need it, but it's sure important.
I have a question for Ellen. Do you get involved between you and your, I guess, project manager colleagues at all on bicycle issues?
Yeah, very frequently. In terms of the way our bureau is structured is, you know, it's half split between us planners and the other half is the project managers slash civil engineers. So we work pretty closely together on projects.
You do. Well, so do you actually get queued in to projects that have a strong bicycle component?
Yeah, usually anytime there is a bicycle component, I'm usually looped in, as well as Dave and other folks on our team.
It would seem to me that in addition to potentially attending the public meetings, if you could bring some of those bicycle projects, you know, to our attention, maybe at least through your lens, through your window, to at least maybe talk about things that we would give us an opportunity to either comment in a meeting like this, or to assign folks, within our committee to attend potentially those public meetings and provide input.
Yeah, I believe that's something that we've been discussing as a group, the past few meetings, for the past few backpack meetings, in terms of the idea of like maybe having someone be assigned from the committee just to kind of serve as like, kind of like what Mike is doing with the MTP refresh, having the ability to attend meetings and public open houses, for example, and then coming back to the group and reporting amongst the group members.
Thanks.
Mike, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, I was sort of hopeful the meeting last month that we were going to have a discussion about, we back in the day when it was the Daves, and we would interact on that very specific project specific basis. And I understand staff's not set up to do that anymore. And I was hoping for some creative solutions to provide the same sort of input. And it was, I guess, I appreciated the honesty from last month, which basically she had some ideas on a way a community group that wanted to get involved might be able to get involved, as opposed to a committee formed by the county manager for his advice. So it's pretty clear they don't have a role for us, other than participating like we are with all the other commissions and committees in some of the major planning efforts. That is a role, but it did not feel at all like there was a sense of, oh yeah, here, I need your advice. That's why I called you forward. That's why I pay staff to sit with you every month. And here's the reason why. Here's the thing I need from you. He said when he met with us, he was very vague about, I need you to be more strategic. But then we asked, well, how do you want us to be more strategic? And the answer was, well, you could show up at community input gatherings. And I think if that's all they need, then there's no reason to have a committee, because it's not. We can do that as individuals. So that was my first kind of sense coming out of it, was that he really doesn't have a need for us. And under the relatively new public engagement process, there's no way staff can engage with us in a meaningful way, because they're too busy engaging in the other formats. I don't know. I think we might be able to make some proposals back to him about how we can provide strategic input. I had some ideas about helping with design standards, since there won't be any in the transportation plan, or there won't be a bike element anymore. They're not going to provide any sort of design elements. So that's something that we could provide some input on. We could provide input anytime a project touches one of the new priority bike corridors on the map, which I'll be talking about in a few minutes. If the county was willing to say, look, anytime there's one on a bike priority, we will talk to you about that project, because that's critical for biking. That would make sense. But if they're not willing to even engage at that level, then I think the manager's saying, look, I have to have you guys. I have no idea what I want you to do. Anyway, that's my piece of it. But I think we could develop some suggestions and see how far those go.
Thank you. That was very, very helpful. And yeah, let's see, Randy go next.
Well, having seen the shift that occurred in the county after the streetcar disaster, I know that the county manager, and in fact all of the county managing staff, is desperately afraid of pushback, and they're most afraid of pushback from committees. So that's part of the reason why nobody really wants to give us a role in projects so that we could complain that we were being ignored or something like that. The whole outreach process, which is, to my way of thinking, not very productive, arises from that. The idea that we were a bunch of white people from good neighborhoods who wore Lycra and commuted set in, and the county decided that this probably wasn't a committee they wanted to listen to because of that. And so we've got some uphill to go through here if we're going to get to a place where we have a meaningful role. I think Mike is exactly right. And I think the first thing that the committee should be doing is supporting him. We should be putting a lot of effort into the homework that he's putting forth for us. It is probably one of the most significant things we can do at this point, and we shouldn't be thinking that a monthly meeting is all we have to do. So, second thing is on the organized, on the open houses that they hold to hear about projects. I have found those to be not very, what would you say, not very efficient ways of giving input. The people who are there sometimes don't even know much about the project. They are outreach people as opposed to the project managers, or at least that's what I experienced. But if we're going to give input at the project level, and if nobody is going to ask for our input at the project level, and I don't think it's fair to put Alvin on the spot to say, bring us the projects and we'll chew you up and spit you out. And that's not, his bosses are going to be really upset if we insist on doing that. And as we have seen, you can actually end up working in Fairfax if you don't toe the line when it comes to how you handle the Bicycle Advisory Committee. So I think we've got to let Ellen off the hook. But it is possible for us to organize groups of maybe 3 to go to the open houses where they look for input, supposedly look for input. They get really shallow input, I believe, and I think that's exactly what they want. But that doesn't mean that the Bicycle Advisory Committee can't take a look at the project and produce something that we would, with 2 or 3 representatives at a meeting, be able to put forward. So I think there are ways to keep giving the county input, whether it wants it or not. And I would urge that we look into that.
Thank you. Really helpful comments. Next we have Steve.
Yes. So I think the suggestion that we have a representative from the Transportation Commission be on this committee is a really good one. Chris Ladd always was he was a fabulous addition and served as that connector to the commission, which is the one place where we could have more communication to the board itself. So that's, I think, I'm not sure how we go about doing that. Do we get in touch with the commission and ask them, I suppose, to find a liaison? And and this would be the more radical suggestion, but we could just all resign from this committee, basically disband it. Of course, the county manager can invite, 15 other people to become the new, and then we become, an advocacy organization, and we show up at the Transportation Commission meetings. They're all public meetings, right? We can show up there. We can show up at any others that are important, um, and just have our voices known. We'll be at, council meetings as individuals or even as, part of this advocacy group, right? I mean, the Alexandria BPAC is not a county or not a city sanctioned organization. They're an external advocacy group that's developed a good working relationship with the city. Anyway, that's a more radical suggestion, but I mean, in some ways, it may be turn out to be more effective than being emasculated like we are.
Thank you. Perhaps good working relationship with the city are the keywords, sort of how the committee is formed or formulated may matter less than those relationships.
Yeah,
I don't know.
correct.
Okay, who's next? Let's see. Eric Goodman.
I think Dana has a hand before. Well, no, actually, I take that back. Okay. I guess two things. First, Steve, I believe it's in our current charter, which is up in the air, to have a member of the Transportation Commission come or be a liaison to our committee. So I think that I think we need to poll them or get in touch with them to see if there's somebody who could actively come to our meetings. And then the other thing I have is a question. I guess Mike had talked about design standards. I know that was a question, at least one or two questions that you sent to Wei was about design standards. Did we ever get an answer on that?
Hardly. Hardly. We asked a lot in our letter and some at the meeting as well on this question of design standards because County Manager Schwartz, whom we report to, had sent us in that direction, and we're open to it. But we did not, from either of them, we did not sort of get to that next level or get much encouragement, certainly. And if we are to engage in design standards, as Mike was talking about with this, supplementary guidance document, for example, that could go along with the MTP and be renewed every year or every 2 years. Like, there are things we could do, but it requires that working relationship with staff, and it requires some transparency so that we can know what are the current design standards, what's our starting point. And, I mean, we would need access to some of the documentation that we do not currently have. So while it's a really interesting idea, and I love the idea of exploring some guidance that could go along with the MTP. I think intersection standards are critically important, but yeah, we did not get much out of Mark or Wei in terms of sort of taking that idea to a next level.
I wonder if we just to follow up, and I'll let others speak, but I wonder if we can kind of maybe get to that in some ways through the Vision Zero process. They've been very encouraging about us to comment on their toolbox and other things like that. So maybe through that process we could sort of get our foot in the door, if that makes sense.
Taking that a step further, is there any way that we can reorient this committee to report to Vision Zero. I don't know. I don't know how this all works. I do know that Pam and others have spent days, weeks, a huge amount of time writing letters to County Manager Schwartz, and at best we get an acknowledgement that it was received, and it's very often kind of a black hole, and we hope we're making a difference, but who knows? So I mean, if we could report to like the Vision Zero team or something, I don't know if that would help, but it might. Oops. Okay. We have Dana.
Yeah, I think that the issue of standards is not, do we want to rewrite the manual of uniform traffic control devices for Arlington County? I think the issue of standards is we go out and look around the county and say, don't do this. For example, we're really good about dropping light poles and signal poles in the middle of frigging sidewalk intersections. In the apron for the sidewalk, for a crosswalk, we'll drop a signal base, where it would only take a little bit to move it back 5 feet into the grass. And those aren't really defined in standards. Those are just a design decision that somebody has made. And maybe the answer is we in the cooperative manner that that they want us to play, we go out and we review the project after and say, okay, this isn't very well done. In the future, do it better. Now, along the lines of we don't have the time or the staff or the inclination to actually engage and present. I was at a the National Landing bid meeting, quarterly meeting, and there were like 5 people from DES presenting on projects. It wasn't, we've done a whole lot of stuff on projects and it's available for you guys to review or participate in. It was the individual project managers presenting. And, what's the difference? We don't own $1 billion worth of infrastructure in Arlington that pays property taxes, maybe. I don't know. But we, if it's appropriate for us not to, get detailed participation, then it should be appropriate for them not to provide detailed participation for the business interests. Okay, again, rant over.
Yeah, and so, Cynthia, in your introduction, you mentioned, we are the people who have knowledge of every pothole and every intersection timing. Yeah, it's one thing to be an engineer in, at the county office building, site visits included still, but to actually be out there riding it every day. And that's also kind of the distinction between kind of general public engagement, the surveys that every project has is, how do you visit this area? How do you, what's your connection to Arlington? Versus being people who walk and ride through these places every day and having that perspective.
Eric, is that a new hand or an old hand?
It's an old hand. Sorry, I'll take my hand down.
All right. I think, am I reading this right? I think I've gone over time with this section, and I should let Mike give his slide presentation. I'm so sorry. I think it's 8 and that was supposed to be at 7:40, huh? But this has been a really good discussion. I have taken careful notes and we should come back to it and figure out what to do. But I like a lot of these ideas. So I think we'll just keep working at it and figure out, or well, we're not giving up. Yeah. So, Mike, do you wanna dive in now and talk about
Sure.
Arlington's transportation future?
Erwin, do you have the slides, or do you want me to share?
Yeah, I have them open. I could share my screen.
Okay. Yeah, if you would do that, that'd be great. So, yeah, and thank you, Randy, for making a plug that we all participate in the homework. So yeah, so they're moving along. So the first thing was the map. So thank all of you that participated last month in our first sort of hack through at looking at the priority network maps. I think this is our best. I think this is going to be the most specific thing we have in this plan when all said and done. So it's really important that we look at this and we try to get the best, the most critical routes in the county identified for bicycling. But just to remind you, they don't identify pedestrians anywhere because they say they will always be the top priority. Basically, it's what routes are we going to prioritize for transit? Which ones are we going to prioritize for bicycle and micromobility? Cars and trucks, they sort of don't put in the list. Their way of saying it was they are already prioritized everywhere. They already have access everywhere. They don't need to be identified. I think there's a little bit of an issue there, but I think that's going to come down to policies about what it means if it's a bicycle corridor. To what extent is parking, driving potentially going to be restricted? All right, go to the next slide. So they've updated. This is the transit priority map. So this is different than the one we saw before. They did take all the comments that everyone did, and I really think they did try to do as good a job as they could to to balance the needs. Go to the next slide, everyone. And then this is the updated bike map. And if you go to the next slide, I blew it up a little bit, or tried to. So take a look at this. This was also in the homework that I emailed to you all. They did take a lot of the suggestions were added to this. There's a few oddities I've noticed in here, but I think they're trying to do their best to accommodate where they can. One of the tricks is if transit's the number 2 priority and cycling is the number 3 priority, what does that actually mean in terms of the type of facilities or road treatment we might see? And there's no answer to that right now, and that comes back down to design standards and policy. So I really would like everyone in the next few weeks to take another look at the map and identify if there's a route that you need that is not on here. We really need improved bicycle facilities to get from an A to B. Let me know, and we'll try to provide additional comment to this. All right, go to the next slide over, and just jump in if anybody wants anything. So the staff also responded to written comments. So there's a long document which I gave you a link to in the email I sent out on Saturday. I just reproduced here the ones that were from us. Well, really from me. I sort of took what I'd heard from a lot of committee members and sort of boiled them down to a few specific comments. So real quick, I noted that they cut it off at the county line, and to really understand connectivity and bike access, you have to understand how those connect into our neighboring localities. Their response was that they're going to make the map more legible, which I'm not sure that addresses my comment. I think that may be a standard comment they had to anything that talked about what was on the map. So not sure about that one. I had a concern that they just identify trails, and some of them were like the WNOD and Custis, and some of them were tiny little unpaved dirt trails that really are not bikeable. And so they give a false sense of connectivity. They just basically pointed back to they use the DPR trail layer, and I guess they were saying there's nothing they can do about it. In the cases where map doesn't identify current or planned bike boulevards, and they said bike boulevards have been integrated, so I haven't gone back to check it to see if that was a change, but they say they have. This next one is the one that I just was talking about, where we're identified as priority 3, but it's a critical link. So Columbia Pike to Shirlington was an example that is prioritized for transit. That might be okay. You know, the Clarendon Boulevard, you know, the treatment they've done from Courthouse down into Roslyn, where they've got the bike islands and the bike lane, I think is great. So it could be that it's not a problem with having priority 2 transit and priority 3 bike to those critical links, but it's unclear. And until we see the actual design standards, we won't know. They're saying that there are parallel routes available. In some cases, that's true. In some cases, I mean, there's always something parallel. It's just a matter of how convenient it is and how actually usable it is from a biking perspective. And then I said, you know, hey, rather, you know, in addition to identifying specific routes, we should just have a rule of thumb that there is a decent north, south, and east, west every quarter mile. And they acknowledge this. They think they kind of tried to do that. So I think that's good. Go to the next slide, Owen. I talked about intersections and how they're the most dangerous area, and it's not clear how they're going to be improved. And I called out a few other specific intersections, which are really kind of bad now, but could be part of an important bike corridor if they get improved. But I didn't want to put a corridor through a dangerous intersection if it's not going to be improved. So then you end up with corridors that don't really make sense because I don't know whether they're going to improve the intersections or not. They said basically intersections along priority route would be addressed when routes are implemented as they are part of the corridor, which helps, but it doesn't really tell us when things are going to get fixed. And then I noted the fact that there are quite a few dangerous places that have been identified by the bike committee for years, and no progress has been made. And so it's hard to kind of worry too much about the details of some future bike corridor when we can't address the things we've been known about for years. They just say we recognize these challenges. And then I talked about the difference between potential near and medium term fixes that could make for some decent bike routes that maybe aren't the ultimate best long term, but we don't, you know, is the perfect going to be the enemy of the good, and how you balance that? And they say we're trying to strike a balance. So any other thoughts on the mapping exercise, Eric?
You know, one thing that's just coming to mind again, as we're talking about, so the Vision Zero efforts, and as you talk about safety, I don't see this coordinated with Vision Zero, or at least there hasn't been any discussion from, I guess, the group that's putting this together, in how it's being coordinated with the Vision Zero efforts.
Yeah, and I don't know enough about Vision Zero, but it hasn't come up much in our meetings or workshops. So that could be a question I could take back to staff. Okay, or we can go on to the next slide. So that's the mapping. So we have 3 things that are due on December 3rd. One is reviewing the modal priority networks I just talked about. So please, over the next week, take a look. I think it's close enough now that if it helps to mark up the map, let me know. If it's just as easy for you to tell me about a road between two intersections that should be added, that can work too. So if you can give me those comments, that'd be great. Then the two other things they wanted us to look at were draft policies and then curb uses. So go to the next slide, Erwin. So they're going sort of through the classic process. We've set a vision, we've set our goals, the 6 major goals, and now the county wants to set policies. And this is really important that I have you guys look at this. Go to the next slide. So they talk about what's in the current MTP, and then some idea about how policies should be. Policies should reflect community values. Policies should be able to evolve over time. Policies should be meaningfully promote, support, and enable one or multiple of the goals. Policies should be global strategies. One of the important things is they did not, at least in what they gave us, tie these policies to goals, because what they were saying was they really tried to look for policies that supported multiple goals. So I don't know if they've got some mapping that they've done, but basically they're saying that, these kind of all the goals support all the policies support all the goals. All right, so go to the next page. I'm not going to read through all of these because there's 3 pages of them, but go ahead and read them. And a couple of questions. One is, are there ones that are missing? Policies that really should be in here that aren't? And I think there may be a bit of a differentiation between policies and I think what they're calling strategies, which would be the next layer down. So these are still pretty high level, and so I guess I'd like folks' input, what you think of them, if they're the right level of policy and if they're the right ones. So the next 2 pages are just more of the policies.
So 3 pages of policies sounds like a lot. Now, are these in any sort of priority order?
No, they're just, I didn't understand them to be anyway. I don't know if anybody else was at the meeting, but they're just, go to the next page. I think there's 20 some policy, 23 policies. They're not prioritized and they're not specifically tied to any of the goals. So they all support at least one goal and many support multiple goals, is what we were told. So once again, I think all of these are, I don't know what you do with these, because they're kind of the goals with a little more specificity, but not to the extent of, oh, okay, because we have this policy, then we're going to do X versus Y. But anyway, would like folks' input in the next couple of weeks if you could. Okay, and then the third thing they wanted our input on, which is even more confusing to me, to be honest with you, is the curb uses, which I think is really critical to us. So what they've basically said is they're trying to identify all the curb uses and how they get prioritized, which is critical. I think that's super important that we do that. I don't think I'm glad they're identifying this as a specific issue. But what they're saying is transportation safety comes first, everyone in the county all the time, no matter what. Modal priority network connectivity comes next. And I think what they mean by that is sort of if it's on one of those priority networks, then that's this next priority for curb use. So that, for a bike, it would be a bike lane as opposed to a loading area. So that's good to hear. It also probably means in a transit area, it's going to be bus loading and unloading rather than a bike lane, which could be problematic for us. But then they kind of lumped everything else together. These are other things that are important curb uses that need to be prioritized. And it's not clear to me. I think it's sort of by area, like different areas would prioritize different things. Yeah, Jillian?
So,
Jillian? Yeah.
this this one also was a head scratcher to me because I actually don't think it's a good thing that they're saying that the modal priority network is an alternative to these things. Like goods access, people access, parking, at least those three things, and utility access they must happen. It's not like we can just wave away and say no goods need to get to most blocks in the county. You know, people don't need to get in and out of cars and that sort of thing. Like that must happen. And so if they're saying that the bike lane competes with that, I think there's a problem. In my mind, it's more like there are these things that we need, and how do we mesh them all together? For example, pick up drop off. You need pick up drop off. If you don't plan for it, you will get it in ways that you probably don't want. So how are we planning for pick up drop off? Where is it going to happen on this block? If we say it's either a bike lane or pick up drop off, then people are just going to stop in the bike lane like they do already.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I may be misstating what they were saying because that wasn't clear to me.
I mean,
exactly what they meant.
Yeah, to be fair, that's what I understood as well. So like it
Okay.
is very weird. I feel like at every turn in this process, I'm scratching my head. Like they've overcomplicated and made things compete with each other that don't need to compete with each other.
Yeah. Well, maybe that is a comment we need to get back to them, that obviously you need all these things. And so how do we put them together on the same block? And I think this is mostly the urban blocks we're worrying about rather than the residential blocks. But you're right. People are going to get dropped off and picked up. Now, goods access, theoretically, from a planning perspective, all these new buildings are supposed to have loading docks someplace. You wouldn't know it from the way trucks pull up in front of them and unload. But anyway, there is a way around that. Dana?
Well, but Amazon is also goods access, right? Like delivery is also
right.
goods access.
Yeah,
and that's not a loading dock question, right?
Yeah.
So, and eventually we're gonna have robots and whatever. Like goods are bigger than just the loading dock issue.
Yeah.
And I just worry they're not thinking
about that creatively. Yeah. Dana? Dana, you there?
Yeah, maybe now I am.
Okay.
In another line of text in that blue bar is actually implementing it. Because because those six blocks at the bottom are without an effective implementation plan, are at best aspirational. We're not going to have people access if we aren't willing to actually manage that process. And we've demonstrated that the public can't manage it themselves or won't manage it themselves in a responsible manner. So short of this, we're just hanging stuff on a Christmas tree and saying, isn't this pretty? Because these are all feel good statements. But unless the county says, and we're going to implement the hell out of this, it's a bunch of motherhood statements.
Yeah. Andrew?
Yeah, just think about like the loading and the curb aspects of things. Just Yeah, how you can kind of gold plate it, have a complete, quote unquote, complete street for like $20 million per mile or whatever. Or just, yeah, loading zones and say 15 minutes only and, actually enforce it. Um, or just even like the residential streets where there's no center line, like everything just kind of happens organically without having lots of extra paint and segregated facilities. And I don't know, just, yeah, the dichotomy. And if if the speed limit everywhere were 20 miles an hour and no one ever actually exceeded that, then things could happen organically. Or if you priced street parking high enough that people, went into the garages so that the curbs were available for pickup, drop off, or loading.
Hmm. Okay, so yeah, so those are good comments, and if folks want to continue to send me those over the next week or two, that would be great, so I can get there. But the other specific thing they've asked for here is what's missing. And actually, go to the next slide. They did give a little bit more information on these things. So this is just gives more, but we kind of know what they all meant. But the question is that their main question is there a curb use another curb use we should be considering besides these? But then I think even more critically is what do you do with this list and how does it impact design? And are these things actually competing, or can we come up with a system where they can work organically? And I guess one thing that'd be interesting to me is where is there an example of where this was done well? So if you guys can think about that, who do a lot of traveling and have seen a really good, safe mix, that would be really helpful. Eric?
Just one thing to add, talking, obviously they're looking for anything that they've missed, but just something to add that I found interesting. There was I guess a recent talk by a person who talked about parking, and it was at the public library recently. And the person that interviewed him from the county was the curb space manager. So be interesting to hear from her and see if she has any other thoughts as well, since that's basically her job.
Yeah, that would be good.
So,
Okay.
so one thing that
Go ahead, Julian.
I find super weird, one thing I find super weird about this list is that I'm used to talking about the curb, meaning the street side of the curb. And this is clearly talking about both, I think it's talking about both sides. I mean, sidewalks are the other side of the curb, and
Yeah.
most of the outdoor seating and stuff is on the other side of the curb. And it almost is like if you look at if you look at all of the public space as one that gets divided up, I actually think that's better. That's that's how we should be looking at things, and dividing up the public space and then thinking about how we delineate and separate, which sometimes is a curb, sometimes is flex post, sometimes is those little parking in thingy. Like there's bunches of ways to delineate different space. That like if we were doing that, I would be like, oh, this is great. But because we're still because they're still shoehorning it into the curb, I'm also confused as to what they're doing.
You're right. When you look at this
yeah.
list, it's more like streetscape. It's more like what's the because this is about fighting over the right of way, like we always do, right? Are we going to put in a planter box or a right? And it's not just the curb. So you're right. Yeah, that's a good point, Jillian. I think really rebranding this would help. I think a little bit the way we're thinking about it.
Yeah. And as far as examples of where things work, I think when you know, I can think of a specific time in when I was in Copenhagen, and it was relatively early morning. We are on what felt like a pedestrian street, but all of the businesses were getting their deliveries. So there actually were a lot of trucks and delivery vans around. But the delivery, you know, everything about there was no curb at all. It was just, you know, the same level between one side and the other side of the quote unquote street. And yeah, there were vans and stuff around, but everybody was going super slow. It was clear. My kids were running around, and you know, the drivers were respectful of the kids, not vice versa. And everything about the design led to that. That's one way you can do it. And I think the point that I think Andrew had about residential streets sort of is in the same direction. On the other hand, on really big busy streets where they allow cars and trucks to go faster, it's all about separation. And you know, for many of for all of these uses, it's sort of like these uses are the stationary or non moving car uses of space. I don't know. It's almost like assuming that moving car is the default, and then we have to talk about everything else, which is a problem. If we turn it around and say we're talking about streetscape and how to divide up our streetscape and what are all of the things we need to have in our streetscape, that is like a great development. But I also think we don't need to reinvent this wheel. Either you gotta keep the vehicles to really, really slow speeds and lots of understanding that they're a guest and that they have to be really, really careful, or you have to separate the hell out of the modes. Those are your two options.
Yeah. Point. Cynthia?
Yeah, I like those comments a lot, Jillian. And just like looking at this and thinking about all these competing uses for the very same small amount of space, makes me think that we need to like really push back against that whole sort of basis that cars go everywhere and that cars get all the best, like all the real estate, because we're not gonna get like a good system, a good outcome if we just let that be the case, I feel like. And I don't travel anywhere except for Brooklyn, but but Brooklyn, you know, has a lot to teach us. They I mean, ever since 2020, they still have, you know, eateries in the street. They still have like a lot of streets close to through traffic. Like, why, you know, why can't we do some of that too? So I think it would be great if we sort of push back at this basic assumption that, you know, cars are everywhere.
Yeah, it just occurred to me while we were talking about this. I get really annoyed, as I know we all do, when I'm coming down the bike path and a bike lane, and there's a delivery truck sitting in the middle of the bike lane, or a bus or a car, whatever it is. But really, what's bad about that situation is the fact that when I leave the bike lane and have to go around that obstacle, I am thrown out into a traffic lane of cars that don't expect me to be there and are driving too fast, right? If I knew the cars knew I was there and respected that space in that way, then the fact that I'd go around the truck wouldn't be that big a deal. So it is a different way of thinking of things, and maybe it is about slowing everything down, especially in the central urban areas, and trying it. You know, we do have faster car streets around the outside of our urban areas. I'm thinking about the RB corridor. You've got 66 and Route 50, and people can go around. Anyway, just a thought. Any other comments? Okay. Oh yeah, Eric.
Yeah, I guess this might fall under utility access, but I don't see much for street maintenance. I mean, it itself. I think certainly cleaning the streets, other things like that. I think that should also be another category in here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. I think that's all I. Oh, well, that's all I've got for the homework. So once again, I'll send a reminder email out in a few days. But if folks can think about the map, take another look at the map, give me your thoughts on the policies, and then on if you got any more thoughts on the curb thing. And then actually, I think I had another slide, Owen, with upcoming events. We talked about this a few minutes ago about our public engagement, and even though we'd like to have other ways to do it, these are kind of important. So on the 5th, which is the day after tomorrow, from 4 to 7 at the county building, they're going to have an open house on this. They're going to be presenting all the things I just showed you. So it's a good opportunity to have another interaction with staff. And then on the Saturday, the 22nd at Arlington Mill, they're going to have one. Then they're going to have pop-up events and canvas events. And most of those are, they're not intended for folks like us to show up to on purpose. It's just to kind of grab people on their way by and get random thoughts and advice. So with that, I am done now. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for working on this. And would it be helpful to meet again in person like we did the other, couple weeks
Sure.
ago? Would that be something of interest?
If folks would be interested to do it, I'll take input any way I can get it. So I guess maybe let's send an email out, Cynthia, and get interest. And if we get more than a handful of people, we'll find another bar to hang out in for a few hours and call it a committee meeting.
Exactly. I thought it was quite a lovely evening. Would anyone like to pipe up right now and express an opinion? Should we try and meet in person over beer?
I'll drink to that.
I'd be down for it, but I won't be for the next 2 weeks.
All right, let's try and make this happen. We'll figure it out offline. All right, what else? So Owen mentioned that we haven't had an election in quite some time. I don't know if I ever was elected. I was asked if I would fill a spot. I said, okay. So I guess, yeah, I'll let Ellen take over.
Yeah, thanks, Cynthia. Yeah, I kind of want to defer to you guys on this one. I'm not sure how it was done the last time. I believe you just mentioned that you just volunteered to serve as the chair. We were supposed to do this 2 years ago, so this is my bad. In terms of also updating memberships, so I'm trying to be more proactive in terms of doing this. Y'all might have noticed that you have staggered terms. Not everyone's going to be appointed at the same time. I think the intent behind that originally is to have some continuity between members, but obviously there's no term limits. There's no come in and kick you out kind of thing. So I definitely want to defer to y'all in terms of how you want to go about in terms of selecting chair and vice chair for the next 2 years. And I did mention to Cynthia, if she wants to stay on as chair, that's perfectly fine. Like I have no qualms about it. I think Cynthia's great.
Hey, Elwin.
Yep.
Can you discuss the the draft charter that you got, that DES and the county staff that do say, that establish term limits and everything, that is now on hold because we're really busy doing other stuff? Is that a change in, are we changing the policy from the one that was proposed by DES?
Yeah, from my understanding, that proposed draft was never adopted. I believe there was an impasse between the committee and staff. So we're still going off the existing charter that's been in place for a number of years. And based off the current charter, there's no term limits or membership, size, whatever.
So you're saying that the draft charter that was staffed was recognized to be a dumb idea by the county, and they're not going to be advocating for it in the future?
No, from my understanding, it's on hold until the MTP refresh is complete.
Well, no. That's you answered a different question. Did the county recognize the draft charter when they got pushback on it was a dumb idea, and they're not going to be advocating for it in the future?
No, that's not my understanding.
Okay.
Dana, I think they're thinking that what will come out of the MTP refresh is a refresh in the idea of all these committees. I mean, I don't think Ellen's going to say that, but like, let's read the tea leaves here.
Okay.
Okay. I guess if anyone wants to nominate themselves or nominate somebody else as the chair or vice chair, like I said, I want to defer to you guys in this. Or if Cynthia and Dana want to stay on as chair and vice chair, that's perfectly fine as well.
I nominate Cynthia and Dana as chair and vice chair for life.
Nice.
Second, do we have a second?
Second.
I second.
Thank you.
That was easy.
I guess. So, I'm happy to stay, or I'm happy to, give this privilege to somebody else. I never actually ran for vice chair nor for chair, as far as I know. But I'm happy to do it. If somebody else is eager to do it, yeah, absolutely dive in. My time has been a little bit tight lately because I work on hazardous air pollution from the fossil fuel and petrochemical industry. So, if somebody has, a lot more time to dedicate, then you're most welcome. Yeah, I'm flexible, so whatever works.
Okay, I guess hearing none, I guess we'll move forward with reappointing Cynthia as the chair of the BAC and Dana as the vice chair. Yeah. Going once, going twice.
Congratulations.
Hip hip hooray.
Yay.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great privilege. And Dana's hand is up.
Yeah. As many of you know, Alexandria had a contract parking pilot program where they were doing contract enforcement of an essential level of parking violations pretty much in Old Town. And Arlington now had an article this morning, I think, that said that we're collecting like 42% of payment for parking spaces in the priority parking program areas. Alexandria reported out last week at the county or the city council meeting that they offered three choices. The staff did. One was to declare the pilot over and return to the status quo using parking, parking aids by the, that belong to the city. Another one was to continue it as it was, but make it permanent. And the third choice was to continue it, but expand both the time and the locations that they were doing it. The county or the city staff said that it was actually working pretty good. It was freeing up people, city people, to do more higher priority parking issues that were outside the scope of the contractor, and they were being basically more responsive and more comprehensive across the city. The city council seemed to favor, there wasn't up for a vote per se, but the city council seemed to favor the third option, which was to make the program permanent and expand it both in terms of time, the days of the week, as well as the locations in the city. It might be a great thing for Arlington to figure out, the recipe for the secret sauce and do some more of that, because, the current reliance on the county employees doesn't seem to be benefiting us. Thank you.
So Dana, I think I missed something. What exactly is Alexandria doing? And what is their rate? Like you said, 42% of people pay in Arlington.
No.
Do we know what they pay?
No, I don't think they have they don't have the data sources. The 42% is the priority parking, the measured or the the parking spaces in Arlington that have the telemetry installed. Those little hockey pucks installed, so they know when a car is in the space. Alexandria basically hired a contractor to do enforcement of a reduced body of parking rules in Old Town, in the immediate Old Town in the immediate vicinity. And what that did was it not only increased the amount of enforcement there, but it freed up the city staff that was doing enforcement in Old Town to do enforcement elsewhere in the city. And it seems to have been a success. And I think the city wants to expand it. Arlington, when I engaged them some time ago about it, suggested that there was problems with the collective bargaining agreement that would prevent Arlington from doing it. But it would certainly make sense for Arlington to do the same thing. Just position people in the Roslyn-Ballston corridor and Crystal City, and let them live there for all I know. That way we could actually have curb space management that actually manages the curb space. That was just a quick update from the presentation last week.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have thoughts on that, or should we move along? The other items on our list, BAC business and announcements. And then if we have a couple of extra minutes, we can also write a list of our questions for ACPD, Arlington Police, and hopefully they will join us at our December meeting. So, but we can Randy.
Elwin, I would like to know what's happened to your Custis Trail project. The bumps are getting worse.
Yeah, so, given the amount of issues and things that need to be done for the Custis Trail, it's going to take a while to, implement a lot of the recommendations that were identified in the study. So I believe the the bumps you mentioned, we referred to them before in previous meetings as like moguls. I believe Steve brought those up. From my understanding, it sounds like DPR will be paving several portions of the trail within the next few months. So it's up in the air as to the limits of that. You know, their budget is pretty tight this fiscal year. But in terms of things that are happening sooner than later, the trail will be repaved in certain sections. We're also looking at doing some quick build projects to address several of the trailhead access with the surrounding neighborhoods. And then we have applied for funding at the regional level for design work for the entirety of the trail. So there's other things that we're working on. I've been in contact with the Dominion to hopefully get some of these lights repaired. Several fixtures have been out and identified in the study. So there's a lot of moving pieces, both in the short term and in the long term. But as always, funding is always something that holds us back.
So about those moguls, do we know, like, has anyone looked at the contract to identify whether there's any possibility of, like, bringing that same team back? And I mean, they should fix their bad work, but is there some sort of a warranty? I know that we sort of discussed that before, and I'm not sure where that ever ended up. It wasn't that long ago that it was fixed before.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm mainly just been hearing, like kind of like game of telephone, where I just hear one thing from another person in the department. But from my understanding, it seems as if it's more so that's the soil that's causing the trail to dip in certain areas in terms of like what's underneath it. It's definitely something that's above my understanding. I don't really know how the soil compaction works and things like that. But I've just heard that they'll be doing repaving to address these bumps that are along the trail.
Yeah, but we know that repaving is only a temporary fix, right? I mean, what Cynthia brings up is that after 4 or 5 times of having them come back, the county, put together a pretty intensive, comprehensive project that was supposed to solve the problem forever. They identified what the real problem was, and the contractor was hired to figure out what's the problem and then what to do. And I mean, that part of the trail was closed for quite some time while they did that project, and it didn't work. So if I were the county, I might be a little irked that I spent all this money on you, contractor, to fix this problem forever, and you failed. So whose job is it in the county to call them up and say, you got to come back and fix your mistake?
Yeah, I could ask to see what the story is. I'm not sure where the disconnect happened.
Yeah. I mean, if this were on a road, right, that cars drove on, I think it would be getting a lot more attention, right? If cars were basically losing their bumpers, bouncing over a piece of road that had been supposedly fixed by a contractor, I'm pretty certain the county wouldn't say, you know, maybe a couple years from now, we'll try and get some funding and see if we can't fix this problem. So this is just another example in my mind of how, the bicycles are just way down on the priority list or forgotten entirely. I mean, the Custis Trail is one of the two probably most important transportation corridors for people who are not in cars, who are traveling on a human powered vehicle or an e-bike or something like that. It's not a side street. It is the superhighway of commuters. So can you find that out? Like, who's the person who should be pissed off, and are they doing anything about it?
Yeah, I could ask again with DPR. It's in their wheelhouse in terms of maintenance of the trail. and I could see if there's any follow-up in terms of what happened with that contract that you're mentioning.
Okay, can we expect to get a report on that next month?
Yeah, I'll see what I can do.
Is that public information? Like who the contractor is and what? I mean, would we need to FOIA for it? Or, which I'm willing to do. I would love to see the contractual agreement between the county and whoever did the work. And then, I mean, it may well be beyond the like the timeline, but even if as citizens we could dedicate some letters to whatever company it is, I think actually that might be a worthwhile effort to put a little spotlight on their good work or not so good work. I don't know, but it would be great to at least find out, like if we can get access and sort of raise a little bit of a stink. Dana.
Yeah, wasn't that a VDOT project? I seem to recall Arlington said we were successful getting VDOT to own this problem. And, so Arlington stood back and let VDOT, is my recollection that Arlington stood back and let VDOT fix the problem because they were the ones that did the original design work and did the original construction.
Well, that explains the whole thing.
And it's entirely possible that VDOT gave specs to the contractor on this one. And if the contractor did what VDOT told them to, the contractor's the only one who's not guilty of something. If you do a design spec and all the contractor has to do is what they're told.
So that's, I mean, that's could be one possibility. It's speculative. So I guess that's still, Elvin, can you find all that out? Can you go back and dig up the history and do whatever the forensic is to determine who's ultimately responsible? And is there anything that can be done other than, hoping that someday, a few years from now, someone will throw a couple $1 million at it?
And the good news for you, Elwin, is it's probably DES coordinating with VDOT as opposed to DPR.
Yeah, I'll see what the story is. This is something that I'm not sure how recently this happened, but this seems to be a recurring problem from my understanding. Yeah, I'll see what I can find and get back to you guys.
Does anyone remember what year? I know we looked it up at the time.
Yeah, I looked it up last time, but I'd have to look it up again. I can't remember.
Yeah, I mean, the same. Well, thank you, Owen. Anything you can find out. I mean, I know it's tricky. That's an interesting twist that Dana mentioned, that maybe it's a VDOT matter. So, yeah. All right, what else is going on?
Let's see, in the announcement section, I did highlight, the open houses that Mike mentioned earlier, just to keep that on everyone's calendars. And also to keep an eye out for the STAR study that VDOT is doing for the Langston Boulevard from Vite Street to Langston intersection. So that second round of public engagement will be coming on, I believe, either this month or next. But just get that on your radar, and I can give you more definite dates, probably the next BAC meeting.
Great, thank you.
And then I'm also going to throw into the chat a public information. Looks like, I'm not sure if you guys know, that the capital region, then there's the National Capital Region Transportation Planning let's see, planning board, sorry. It's basically the regional council of governments that organizes and decides how the region will build future transportation systems. So not just Arlington, but DC and our friends in Maryland and Virginia around us. So they're in the process of updating their future funding for transportation projects, and they're soliciting public comments until, I believe, until November 21st. So if anyone wants to nerd out on regional transportation projects, feel free to throw your comments in there. Or of course, if you wanted to, send like a joint, BAC letter or some kind of correspondence, it might carry some more weight. Yeah, like I said, they were collecting feedback until the 21st, so some time.
Eric has a hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, is that part of COG?
Yeah, it is. So the TPB is basically the transportation arm of COG.
Okay, thanks.
So just for clarity, Owen, so at this point, the county manager is comfortable with us advocating separately as the BAC with other entities in the region? Or is that, in the past, we've been told that, we are to provide advice to the county manager, and that's our role, and not to speak for the county in any other way to outside organizations. So that's what, I don't know if we need some clarity on that.
Okay, yeah. Sorry if I was confusing. Yeah, I guess in this instance, it might be better to submit comments as individuals. I don't want to get anybody in trouble. But yeah, that's it for me. Besides from that.
Okay, in the 1 minute we have left, does anybody have thoughts for questions for ACPD? And if not, you can also send me your ideas online.
I have a momentary diversion if I can. We were talking earlier about if we've traveled somewhere and seen other transportation infrastructure and practices. And I was recently in India, and I'd love to share a video with all of you about how an intersection might work. It's rather entertaining. I found it to be totally remarkable how they were able to navigate. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know if we have sound, but we can see your screen.
Yeah, all right, I'm going to start her now. So this is what I would call an uncontrolled intersection, and I know there's been some thoughts about how these can be used in certain ways, like uncontrolled, like traffic circles and so on and so forth. This isn't quite a circle. They move 3 times the number of people through an intersection as we can in the same amount of time, but it's rather entertaining to watch.
I think success of that intersection, Steve, is predicated on a higher, on a more capable motorist than we experience in Arlington.
So, well, I would say it has more to do with just their approach to how they do it. Everyone is essentially equal. Everyone has an equal right to the right of way. Let's see, how do I stop sharing? There we go. And I found the most interesting thing was in India. We think of India has this caste system where everyone is like assigned to one of 6,000 different castes, but on the streets, literally everyone is equal. It's completely flattened, and the guy in the Lexus and a guy on the beat up old scooter, whoever's 1 inch ahead, they get to go first, and it doesn't they don't get additional priority just because they're in a higher caste or a richer person or have a better vehicle. It's it's all equivalent. And my favorite thing to do the whole time I was in India was ride around in the rickshaws. It was a total blast. It was like a carnival ride. There were no crashes. I mean, this stuff happened, and what you saw there was that was mild compared to a few of the places we went. I mean, it was just it worked fantastically. Well, I mean, we can't do it here, obviously, but I was just really intrigued at how they managed in that in the density of Mumbai to get so many people around on their little scooters and rickshaws and bicycles, and the guy walking down the street with his pushing his ox cart thing. It was great. I loved it. All right, and back to our regularly scheduled program.
All right, Eric has a hand up. Eric, are you there?
Sorry, I was talking on mute. That didn't help. I wanted to ask Steve, do you have any statistics on crashes, pedestrian and bicycle crashes? Certainly that looked like things were worked out well, but there's also, with a large volume of people, do they also end up with lots of crashes?
So I didn't look up any statistics. I wasn't there for reasons of bicycling or transportation, so that just happened to be my experience. But I rode around in one of those little tuk-tuk rickshaws a lot. I mean, several hours worth of riding probably, and never saw a single crash. That said, I also learned that if you're a not very able person, you require some help, or you're elderly, you can't you really don't go out into many places. You might stay in your neighborhood because there really aren't any good places for people to walk. Most of the sidewalks are either non-existent or in pretty lousy repair. And so that is a problem, a real problem. And I talked to some people about it, and they say, yeah, that a lot of people, once they reach a certain level of mobility, they can't go out on foot. I mean, they might be able to, have someone pick them up and take them somewhere, um, but I mean, I did not witness any actual um, crashes or people, on the side of the road who've been hit. There weren't a lot of people on regular, two-wheel bikes or even e-bikes. Mostly what you'd see are the little like Vespa type scooters and, kind of like lower powered motorcycles, and then tons and tons of the three-wheeled rickshaws, and fewer cars. Having a car is just like a huge, I mean, it's just, you can't get around in a car. Everything else is 10 times faster. So you're just better off, on your scooter. Um, so anyway, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to talk separately. I don't want to take up this meeting, but I can go on and on about my experience. So, but I don't have any statistics. I'm sorry.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. It is now 9:05, so I guess we'll call this to its conclusion unless anybody else wants to jump in. We all good? All right, and Mike and I will figure out some possible dates for another gathering in person to talk about the MTP homework. All right, thanks everyone. Have a really good night. Be safe, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you.